Hi, I had such a good time vlogging yesterday. Actually, it took me about 5 attempts and I was quite exhausted by the end of it. But um, when I put it online, I did get this sort of buzz from seeing it and from talking about my book. I read a lot of young adult books. Usually I like the ones that are psychological thrillers. My perfect book is a book that is on the edge of being young adult and adult. And I think in America they call it new adult, but new adult isn't such a big thing over here. But I recently read Good Me, Bad Me, and I loved that. It's one of the best books I've read in a long time. Uh, the the protagonist in it is a girl who is the daughter of a female serial killer, and I just think that's such a new thing, and it's very hard in books to be original because there's so many fantastic writers out there that you often feel that, well, they've done everything that can be done, and it's really hard now for new writers to come up with something original. So Good Me and Bad Me, which is by Ali Land, was a really fantastic read and a good look into the psyche of a teenager who is on the edge of doing something exceptionally bad. Um, Obviously, I'm a big fan of 13 Reasons Why. In fact, I read it way before my daughters when it first came out, and I was just so emotionally connected to Hannah, and I hoped that it was like some sort of science experiment and that Hannah would be alive at the end. But you know, there was no happy ending for Hannah, and I think, you know, that is the reality for some kids. So I don't think it's unusual that you would find that in a book. And funny enough, a book that I really enjoyed, which is called Deconstructing Emily by Kim McCrate, isn't a young adult book, but I think teenagers would love it. It's from the mother's perspective. She gets a phone call from the school and she goes down to find that her daughter has jumped off the roof of the school building, and she's obviously devastated. But what she struggles with most is the fact that were the signs there that her daughter was struggling, and she never saw them. But she thinks she knows her daughter well enough to know that her daughter would never commit suicide. So a bit like Agatha Christie, she goes on this investigation, and so much of it is reliant on the information that teenagers have. And as we know, teenagers, you know, they close shop very quickly. It's so hard to get information out of a teen when they, you know, when they shut up. I mean, it's typical. They give it all that when you don't want to, and then when you want them to be you know, to give you some information, you can't get it out of them. And obviously, as a mother myself, that was heart-wrenching for me, reading what that mother was going through. And I cried a couple of times reading that book, and I never cry. I'm very hard-hearted. However, I did cry 3 times during The Haunting of House Hill. That really got to me. It was so sort of spooky, and anything with kids in and suicide, just, it does freak me out a little bit. But anyhow, getting on to some other books that I have read. I've read The Weight of Blood and Arrowhead, and that writer is Laura McHugh, and they're 2 excellent books. The Weight of Blood, I loved it because it's about a teen who's been in care all her life, and she reaches 18 or 21, I'm not sure what it is in America, and she goes in search of her mother, and she goes to the town where her mother lived, and she settles down there, and it ends up to be quite a disturbing experience for her. And I really felt sad. The only thing I struggle with is geography. I just don't have that imagination where I'm able to imagine forests and landscapes And so when it's set in America, I struggle a bit, and I always find that I end up putting the story that I'm reading in Twilight's Forks, because I understand that bit of America. And oh, Heart-Shaped Bruise, that is a very, very good teen book. And Thicker Than Water, this ticked a lot of boxes for me, and it's actually from a male point of view. It's a boy and his mother's been murdered, and he is one of the suspects, and he's trying to solve who killed his mother. One, because he wants to know, and two, because he doesn't want to go to prison for it. And that's a great book. I just love books that you know, have a bit of an original twist to them. I'm not good at reading the same story with different characters. I just find that so disappointing, especially when I've paid sort of £7 or £8 for a book. And when it comes to adult reads, which I say adult reads, but I must have been about 12 when I used to go into my local library and take out books by P.D. James and Val McDermid. I mean, The Wire of Blood, I read that when I was sort of 13 or 14, and it scared, oh my gosh, I was goose pimples and too frightened to go to sleep and having nightmares, but I loved it. And that's what I like, a book that has me on the edge, that has my blood pressure going up, and I feel quite anxious when I'm reading it because I'm just so connected to the characters. And I've got a few books here that sort of, you know, hit the buzzer for me. And Matthew Frank, I think his third book's coming out shortly. This is his second book. And what I love about this is it's a sort of, I would say, a hardcore Morse, but the policeman in it is a very sort of damaged person. He has PTSD, and I mean, his body, I think something is in there saying that it's like it's been blown up and stitched back together again. So he has sort of horrendous scarring on his body, and you know, he has to deal with that and memories of being in the army, and whilst he's going around London solving crimes. And it's so well written. I don't like an overly descriptive book. You know, I don't like a chapter on, you know, the trees, and this one is brilliant. And I just think such a really good hero, and I would love to see it on the television. C.L. Taylor, I think I've read most of C.L. Taylor's books, and they're all very gripping psychological thrillers. You feel very connected to the characters in there. It's not always obvious who the culprit is, and that's what I like, because I've read so many crime books. I kind of guess within the first couple of chapters who's guilty, and that's always a bit disappointing. In fact, my husband hates it when we watch police programs together, because within like 10 minutes I feel like I know who's done it, and he finds it really irritating. So this is a great book for sending your blood pressure up. I really like these books. Sarah Hilary, I think this is her second book, and I think she might be on her fifth book, but she has such a strong female lead here, and her name's Marnie, and that's the name that I always wanted to be called ever since I saw the Alfred Hitchcock film with Sean Connery in, but I'm not called that. I'm called something much more boring, and that's why my pen name, Gertrude.t Kitty, is just a little bit odder than my real name. It's pacey, it's complex. She has a brilliant disturbed brother in here, so there's a good subplot going on. Liz Nugent, Lying in Wake. I read her first one, Unravelling Oliver, which I picked up in Dublin Airport. She's an Irish lady, and she's from the motherland, because I am Irish descent. And they're very twisty, disturbing books, and I do love dark, twisty and disturbing. My favourite book is dark, twisty, disturbing with romance. I would love a book. Well, actually, I've written a book. It's not Random Attachment. It's actually my first book, The Rebirth of Henry Whittle, and that is quite dark, and it has an assassin in it who is exceptionally attractive, and throughout it you do not know whether he's kind of a goodie or a baddie. And I got that idea from watching Vampire Diaries. Me and my youngest daughter love Vampire Diaries, and we love Damon because there's nothing I think as good as a baddie who you think is actually going to be a goodie, like Snape. That's what I loved all about the Harry Potter books. Snape was the character that most grabbed me, and I think most grabbed most people, and you just didn't know, was he a goodie, was he a baddie, and that is my favourite type of book. But I think that's it for now. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you another day. Bye.